We will record in case anybody misses us. And slideshow from start. Okay, so welcome to the talk again. Insectary plants by Tia Silvasy, Florida-friendly landscaping agent here in Orange County. So just a little housekeeping. Please don't disturb the class too much. We'll have an opportunity to have questions at the end of the presentation. It should be about a 30-minute presentation today. And a little bit about me, for those of you who don't know me, I grew up on a farm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that's where I got my love for horticulture, eating fresh carrots pulled from the ground and, you know, raspberries right off the tree. And ever since I was 14, I had my first job, and I was at plant nurseries and arboretums, and I studied for my bachelor's degree at UCF. I got my bachelor's degree in environmental science, and then I got my master's degree at the University of Hawaii in tropical plant and soil sciences. And I've been with the University of Florida for the past 2 years, doing research and extension. And I just love plants, all kinds of plants, trees, grasses, shrubs, and I like growing food too. So I'm the Florida-friendly landscaping agent, and we have 9 principles that we follow to encourage people to adopt environmentally friendly practices for their yard. And the talk today is going to focus on number 5, which is attract wildlife, because insectary plants are kind of defined by plants that provide food for insects, butterflies, pollinators, you know, beneficial insects. And we're also going to talk about managing yard pests using these beneficial insects as a biological control. So what are insectary plants? Well, it's part of an integrated pest control program. IPM is short for that. And as y'all receive the training in IPM, first you want to identify the pest, and then 2, determine if it's harmful or neutral or beneficial. And then if you do determine it is a pest, then you seek specific controls for that pest. And so we're going to grow insectary plants that are going to provide food, as in pollen and nectar, and also shelter or habitat for the good bugs, which are then going to prey on the bad bugs. So just a little review of the good bugs. Now, I'm really more of a plant person than an insect person, but everybody knows the ladybugs, and then the life stages of the ladybugs. There's the larval stage and the adult stage, and you know, all stages of the ladybug, both larvae and adult, prey on aphids and other bugs. And then you have hoverflies, which are pictured to the right, and lacewings, that little green bug at the bottom. Also parasitic wasps, praying mantis, minute pirate bugs, Schwarzschild mites, and there's a lot of other beneficial insects. This is just kind of a sampling to get you thinking. And then you have to match, well, what pests do they eat? You know, aphids are a common problem in gardens, and there's a lot of those beneficial insects that eat aphids. And then caterpillars, some caterpillars are bad, like this bean leaf roller caterpillar on the bottom, but some caterpillars are good, like they turn into beautiful butterflies. So that's something to be aware of. And mealybugs pictured over on the right hand side, as well as mites, scale, and thrips. So here's how they work. Most of the beneficial insects are either a predator, which means they are directly eating the aphid bug, or they're a parasite, where this parasitic wasp is laying eggs into this armyworm caterpillar. And so then the larvae will basically eat up the caterpillar. So they're predators or parasites. Now, this is where I'm briefly going to get technical, but the focus of this talk is more about the plants and not about the insects, but it's a little bit complicated to find out what, so you have to say, all right, I'm going to plant this type of plant. Say you're going to plant a lissum, and so that attracts a hoverfly. And so you still need to find, well, what does the hoverfly eat? So maybe you have an aphid problem and hoverflies eat aphids, and then you can look for the plants to plant to do that. So here's the next slide, and these are both from the LnL Institute, which is a nonprofit up in Pennsylvania. So hoverflies, for example, eat aphids, small caterpillars, and thrips. And so, working back, what could we plant to help control aphids? So if you really want to dive deep into insectary plants, you have to follow the trail of, well, what insect do I want to attract to eat what pest, and then choose the plant that can do that for you. But I would say in general, just having a lot of beneficial plants is good, and you'll attract a lot of beneficial insects that will eat your pests. And it's kind of a different philosophy, more of a ecological pest control approach than just spraying everything all the time. So you'll keep these beneficials around by having some of their pest foods. So just a little bit on how to provide an environment for beneficial insects. You want to have a variety of flowering plants and, of different layers. They can include natives or ornamentals. This tells you some different types, and this is how my talk is organized today. We'll talk about herbs, annuals, perennials, native plants, shrubs, trees, palms, and grasses. So there's just all kinds of plants that have benefits for insects. So on the other hand, there are also plants that provide little value for beneficial insects, and these might include like the bromeliads pictured on the right, or the philodendron pictured on the bottom, croton, tea plants, pittosporum. These are mostly foliage plants, and they don't have a lot of flowers. So key to having good plants that provide food for insects is to have a lot of flowers. So herbs are one of the well-known insectary plants, and there's been research on this from a long time ago, especially the herbs with like umbrella-shaped flowers, like this dill flower pictured here on the right, because they have a lot of kind of shallow flowers that the parasitic wasp and other bugs can easily get in there and get the nectar and pollen. So if you're growing herbs, like we had cilantro in our exploration gardens, then it's okay to let them flower, like let them bolt where you don't really eat them anymore, but just let them flower and provide, food for the beneficial insects. Also onion, if you let that go to flower, the bees and other insects really love the onion too. So looking at annual plants, so not all flowers provide, food for beneficial insects, but especially the plants in the Asteraceae family, like the zinnia and sunflowers, those are really good. Plants like impatiens and begonias, they don't provide as much pollen and nectar than other flowers do. So here's just some of our favorite annuals for insectary plants. Pictured in the top is those pretty pink cosmos. And then marigolds are good, phlox, sunflowers, zinnias. zinnia is pictured in the bottom right, that reddish flower. And then also perennials, like black-eyed Susan pictured here, butterfly bush, lantana, pentas, purple coneflower, society garlic. Again, more Asteraceae type of plants, and like pentas have that tight little ball of lots of flowers, so that's a good one. Just think lots of flowers for these insectary plants. Native plants, there's a ton of native plants that are beneficial for attracting the good bugs, and these include coreopsis, blanket flower, blue mist flower, beach June sunflower, goldenrod, and those first 5 I mentioned are all in the Asteraceae family. Horseman, which is the purple pictured in the top left, Liatris, which is the purple pictured in the bottom right, milkweed, the native milkweeds. And we did get our native milkweed in, so if we're allowed to go back to the center, then maybe I can give you guys some plants. We got the Asclepias incarnata in from the AgriStarts nursery. And we got about, I think, 70 plants of them. So we'll be planting some of those around the garden and having some extra ones. And then red salvia, I have that all over my yard, and it just kind of grows and reseeds. It's beautiful. Also shrubs. So like the button bush, if you have a wet area, like next to a lakefront or a pond, all types of hollies in the top picture. They get these little flowers. They're currently flowering right now. That's the gallberry, the Ilex glabra, but also the Ilex vomitoria produces a lot of small flowers like that. Elderberry pictured in the bottom. It has that huge umbrella type flower with just loaded with flowers, and then later loaded with berries, which wildlife also likes. Firebush, Lionia, and viburnum, like the dwarf Walter's viburnum has a beautiful show of flowers in the springtime. And then trees, also, you don't really think of trees as insectary plants, but the red maple, Dahoon holly, red bud, sea grape, magnolia, and others, you know, they all have flowers that provide pollen and nectar for beneficial insects. And palms, don't forget about the palms. This is in flower a saw palmetto. And so look at all those flowers there. A lot of people cut the flowers off the palms because they don't like the berries, but I would advise them to cut the flowers after they're done flowering, and once they go into the fruiting stage, to allow the beneficial insects to take advantage of all the flower produced, all the pollen and nectar produced. If you buy honey, you'll see some honey is labeled as saw palmetto honey or palm honey, and that's because it's such a big resource for bees. So here in Central Florida, we have the saw palmetto, which is the short one, the cabbage palm, which is our state tree. And if you're in South Florida, you could grow coconut palms. I planted one in my yard, don't tell anybody. Jelly palm is good for Central Florida, as well as queen palm, whereas the royal palm is more for South Florida. And then finally, we're going to talk about grasses. So grasses are not like have a lot of pollen and nectar in their flowers, but they just provide a habitat for nesting sites and shelter for the good bugs to hide in. So if you're gonna put some clumping grasses, some of these are native, and the beneficial insects prefer small clumping grasses. Okay, so consider integrating some of those into your landscape. So next I'm gonna tell you how to go about adding these plants to your garden or landscape. This is a picture of my vegetable garden. So I have some hot peppers, I have some black-eyed peas, sweet potatoes. Those are some yellow crookneck squashes that you can see. And behind them, outside of the deer fence, I put the flowering plants. And so they're just kind of planted in a row, you know, right next to my vegetable plants. So there's different terms like companion planting or intercropping, insectary strips. They can all be kind of used interchangeably. If you're talking about a small home garden, then you might not be using some of the same terms that commercial farmers do. But you just want to have the plants next to or the nearby vicinity of your plants in your garden that you're trying to get the pests removed from. And so these are just a couple feet apart here. So that works fine. You could plant them in between the plants, but I just wanted to have more room for vegetables. The flowering plants that I selected here are mostly deer resistant, like the deer don't like to eat them because I have a big deer problem in my yard, thus the deer fence. And then if you get into more like larger scale planting, you can do what's called a hedgerow. And this is the Agricultural Research Station in Salinas, California by the USDA. And you can watch this YouTube video on your own if you want. It's called a biological control buffet in the salad bowl of America. So they're growing lettuce here, and then they're using different strategies, which one of them is this hedgerow. So a hedgerow is just a grouping or a planting strip of perennial plants that will live year after year and provide, you know, shelter and food for beneficial insects. And so that's one way of controlling the pests in the garden. They also use intercropping, where next to the lettuce, they have sweet alyssum planted. And they're doing research on how many sweet alyssums do you need for, you know, how many lettuces to achieve a good amount of control on the aphids that grow on the lettuce. So that's a really interesting video if you want to watch that, by Dr. Eric Brennan. And be sure to apply your finishing touches, you know, to whatever kind of plantings you do according to the Florida friendly principles, like irrigate efficiently, you know, following your watering days on the watering restrictions according to your water management district, and then fertilize responsibly. A lot of these insectary plants do not need a lot of fertilizer. So they will require less fertilizer and less irrigation than, say, your vegetables. So that's why people often plant them in a strip alongside of vegetables, is because they have less fertilizer and water requirements. And again, we're coming up on our June 1st fertilizer restriction period, which will last until September 30th. And so now is the time to fertilize if you have problems, nutrient deficiencies in your plants, or you have something you're establishing and want to give it a little boost before summer, because we get so much rain in the summer that just washes away a lot of the fertilizer. So it's risky for our waterways to apply fertilizer in the summer. That's why the ordinance was created. And using a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch once your plants are established, that will help conserve moisture. And don't use pesticides, or use them sparingly, because we're trying to create an ecosystem that is having the good pests and the bad pests where the bad pests are, food for the beneficial insects. So if you do have to use pesticides, use the least toxic ones and only where needed in the target area. And then you want to maintain your landscape and garden, but not too neat. Sometimes having a place for a couple dead sticks or something will allow a little bit of habitat for these beneficial insects to live. And then if you're starting out with an insectary garden and something dies, then just fill it back in and have a lot of flowering plants year round. That's why a mixture of native and ornamental plants is good. It shows that it can make the most flowers for all year round. So just a couple resources that might be helpful to you. There's the EDIS, of course, that the University of Florida has a lot of wonderful publications. There were two publications I found particularly helpful about this topic, and one is the Natural Enemies and Biological Control, and the other one is Natural Products for Pest Control. And so those are both really good information sheets, I believe, written by Lyle Buss and some of the other experts up in Gainesville. And then there's this Solutions for Your Life website here I posted at the bottom on nectar plants. And so they had a good listing of plants for bees and butterflies and other creatures. So that's the end of my presentation. And at this time, you're welcome to ask questions. And you can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question or have a comment or say hi to your friends.
Tia, this is Joe Ventura.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, the question that I have is that restriction, I thought it was more for like lawns. Are you saying that if I have landscaping in my backyard or on the side yard, I wouldn't be able to apply any fertilizer?
Yes, the fertilizer restriction is for landscape and lawns, although vegetable gardens are exempt. And also you are allowed to fertilize to help get plants established.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, this is Patricia Underwood. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. What's your question, Patricia?
My question is, my son seems to have chiggers in his yard. Is there something we could treat that with that's not going to affect the beneficial insects?
I'd have to look that one up. Chiggers, I think, are hard to control pest.
Okay, I was afraid that was going to be the answer.
Yeah, like aphids are easily controlled by beneficial insects, but something like spider mites is more difficult to control. And, like whereas aphids, you can just spray with like soapy water, kind of insecticidal soap stuff. Like spider mites or like chiggers will require a more heavy duty, pesticide.
Okay.
What are you currently spraying them with?
Absolutely nothing. I just discovered that he's got them.
Oh, geez, yeah. I'd have to do research on that. Does anybody know a good resource for looking up chiggers? Pest control for chiggers?
Not really.
No. Okay.
I keep hoping they'll just move to the neighbors or something.
Is he sure? Are they sure that it really is chiggers? Because we don't get chiggers very often down here.
Well,
no.
We got bit. I hadn't had a problem with it, and we went and put a couple of irrigation heads in the yard. And of course, I was down on my hands and knees, and when I got home, I had a bunch of bites that didn't look familiar to me. And we actually looked them up, and they look exactly like chigger bites.
Hmm.
Could they be substituted for like maybe like a spider mite bite?
I don't know. I'll look up spider mite bites and see.
Yeah.
How about fleas or ticks?
No, because I've had flea bites. I've seen flea bites, and this definitely was not a flea bite or a tick bite.
Where does he live?
Over off of Curry Ford, in around Bean Road.
Any possibility of being no-see-ums?
No,
Okay,
because I've had no see-em bites before.
okay.
Good question.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, I'll just keep digging then. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions?
I have a non-landscaping question, but I'll wait till we get to that point.
Okay, any other questions about the presentation? I see in the chat, Lisa asked Tia, can you post or send out your presentation? And yes, I will ask John to put it up on the YouTube.
Oh, good, thank you.
And then I am doing this talk tomorrow for the general public. So if you know anybody who wants to attend, I'm doing a free webinar on insectary plant. It will be the same one as today, tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Same web address?
No, they have to register on the Eventbrite, and I'll put it here in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Everyone in meeting, did you guys get that?
Get what?
I put it in the chat box.
Yeah, it's there too.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just posting it up, and I'm doing some social experiments to see how many people I can get to register for my webinar in like 2 days. So Shalice made the Eventbrite thing for me on Monday, and last time I checked, there were 12 people registered. So it's free and it's open to the public. You guys can come again if you need more information, but it will be the same talk. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Tia.
I'll take a picture of that address so I can send it to somebody.
Okay.